This show is brought to you in part by viewers like you who joined a Patreon or become YouTube members. Thank you. And if you could, hit the like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. There's a saying that I don't know is a thing, but I'm going to try to make it a thing, at least on this channel. But dull Decembers make for exciting Januaries in multiple different contexts, right? If you're a team and you got your division wrapped up and you've won a bunch of games early in the regular season and you have your division wrapped up, you're going to have a pretty dull December, but January will be a very exciting month. If you are on the opposite end of the spectrum, which the Cleveland Browns are today, and you are a bad football team with a horrific record, well, December is not going to be very exciting, but it is going to lead to a very exciting January. Now, sometimes we think exciting means good. Exciting just means shit's happening, right? Like, that's going to be what happens. There's going to be a lot of shit happening in January. The Browns might fire Kevin Stefanski. The Browns might make other moves. It's going to be an interesting month of January. So, one, make sure you're subscribed and notified so you don't miss out on anything. But two, that means that changes are likely to come this offseason. And I said this last year, and I'm going to say this again for this year. When you look at these two off seasons and how well these two off seasons go, will determine the long-term future of the Cleveland Browns. So while it might feel like all people are going to be focusing on this offseason is what the effect from the moves you make today will be in 2026, that's one part of it. But in reality, the moves that the Browns made in 2025 and in 2026 will affect this team until about 2031. We're talking about trying to build the next foundation of the next playoff-worthy Cleveland Browns team. That is what the Cleveland Browns are going to have to do. Whether they draft a quarterback or not, they're going to have to make a decision on quarterback that's going to affect them for a very long time. Whether they fire their head coach or not, they're going to have to make a decision on head coach that's going to affect them for a very long time. What they do in this year's draft will set a foundation for things that will affect them for a very long time. See, these two off seasons that we have been through, 2025 and upcoming 2026, make no mistake about it, are the two most important off seasons of the Cleveland Browns' future. This could be a point in time we look at and we look back to and say, hey, that's when the franchise finally turned it around. That's when they dug out of this Deshaun Watson thing, they got their quarterback, and they became a perennial contender. Hell, if this team wins a Super Bowl in the next 5 years, we're going to look back to this offseason and the offseason prior as the two building blocks for how the Cleveland Browns got there. They're going to have to make a lot of decisions that have a lot of long-term impact. Think of it like 2017 and 2018. When we were going through the 2016 and 17 seasons that led up to those two off seasons, it was hell. They won one game in 32 attempts, 1 in 31. It was pathetic. I mean, the Browns have been bad, but at least they've won, 6 games in the last 2 years? That run resulted in 1 win over the last 2 years. It also resulted in the Browns bringing in Myles Garrett, bringing in David Njoku, bringing in Denzel Ward, getting Baker Mayfield and Nick Chubb. And that core led the Browns to 2 playoff runs. Now, in those 2 years, the Browns had a lot of important decisions to make. What are we going to do at quarterback? How are we going to base the future of this roster on? What are we going to base the future of this roster on? And they made some good decisions, deciding to draft Myles Garrett and not overthinking it. Very good decision. Getting Denzel Ward, very good decision. Nick Chubb in the second round, very good decision. You can argue they could have made a better decision at quarterback, even though Baker wasn't the worst decision you can make, but if you hit a home run at quarterback, maybe Josh Allen, maybe Lamar Jackson. I know whenever I bring up this conversation, people go, well, those guys would have never developed here. But, Baker almost developed here. So why wouldn't Lamar, who is much better than Baker, develop here? I don't get the thought process behind that. But, Josh Allen, he could have developed here. Like, if you could have had one of those guys, you hit the home run on the quarterback, maybe we're having a completely different conversation about who's been coaching the Browns and what this whole thing has looked like over the last 5-6 years. The Browns are in a similar situation today. We're going to talk about that. But before I do, we got to thank my sponsor, Sleeper. Real quick, just want to let you guys know Sleeper has a new offer here. They're offering a free $20 entry, no deposit required. And also, if you're a first-time user, you also will receive a 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code WORSTTAKE. Again, $20 free, no deposit required. Plus, first-time users also receive a 100% deposit match up to $100. Join Sleeper. If you look at the 2025 offseason, I think you can legitimately say, regardless of the results of this year, that Andrew Berry did a pretty solid job in the 2025 offseason. I think the extension he was able to work out with Myles Garrett is a very underrated example of the quality of job that Andrew Berry has done here. Myles Garrett was on his way out. And I think with a lot of other GMs, Myles Garrett would have been able to successfully force his way out of town. I think in a lot of other iterations and organizational structures of the Cleveland Browns, Myles Garrett would have been able to force his way out of town. That did not happen. Not only did Myles Garrett not force his way out of town, Myles Garrett signed a contract that at this point, quite frankly, looks team friendly. And Myles Garrett signed that contract and then bought in later in the season to the Cleveland Browns. So it seems like that situation was handled very, very well. And you could say, well, who's going to mess up a situation like that? We've seen teams mess up situations like that. Why did the Bears have to trade Roquan Smith? Similar reasons. You look at the Khalil Mack trade from Oakland at the time. That was complete dysfunction, right? Like, this has happened before to a team where they have had to trade somebody like Myles because they couldn't work something out because egos got in the way. And I thought Andrew Berry did a great job of, one, being firm with his stance. The organization did a great job backing him up on that stance, right? There was no subversion of that stance from ownership or coach. It was one united front. We're keeping Myles Garrett, and he's not going anywhere, and we can work an extension out with him, but we're not going to work anything else out with him. And they were able to get an extension, and look, Myles Garrett is the one bright spot of the season. Could you imagine how dark this year would feel if you did not have Myles Garrett on the roster? How dark your future would feel if you did not have Myles Garrett on the roster? With Myles Garrett on the roster, and under contract till 2030, that means that if the Browns get it right at quarterback in a few years, because they have a defense led by Myles, they can get back to playoff good much faster than people think, right? I know it feels like the Browns are super far away because we're watching a team without pieces on the offensive line, without a quarterback, and without a true vision on offense. And all of those things are converging for the Browns to just continue to lose game after game. But with a quarterback, you have more of an identity on offense. With the identity on offense, you're going to have more success on offense. And if this team had more success on offense, they would probably be a playoff team. As crazy as you think that sounds, that would be the case in my opinion. Like, I don't think they're that far. Are they a quarterback away from winning a Super Bowl? No, they need to get a better offensive line. They need to get some wide receivers, obviously. They need to improve and let these young guys who are on the roster get older and more experience. But are they a quarterback away from being a competitive team? I think, if they get the right quarterback and that quarterback's ready to play at a high level early, which is not always guaranteed. I mean, look at Drake May. First year, not that great. Second year, really, really great. So, it depends on what kind of quarterback play you get. But yeah, I do think you could be a contending team. And if you have a young quarterback that is elevating your roster and you let that cook for a year or two, then I think you could be a Super Bowl contending team sooner than later. The Browns have the pieces in place foundationally with a solid draft from last year by making some smart decisions when it comes to contract, right? And it's not just the Myles Garrett contract. It's that you have Grant Delpit extended. You have names like Denzel Ward extended for the next couple of years. Like, the Browns have a lot of quality veterans under contract on the defensive side of the ball for a good number of years, which means that their ability to bounce back is just based on what they could put on offense. Now, if we're talking about short-term success, the offense is going to be up and down no matter what they do, because they're going to be a really, really young offense. Like, I think that's one thing we're going to have to deal with in 2026, regardless of how talented the offensive linemen and the quarterbacks and the wide receivers that you draft are. The reality is you're going to be starting a lot of first year, second year, third year players on that offense who don't have a ton of experience, which means you're going to deal with penalties. Young teams always are high in penalties, regardless of who's the coach. Which means you're going to have to deal with rookie mistakes, ineligible receiver downfield, stuff like that, guys not knowing what assignment. You're going to have to deal with that stuff, killing drives here and there. So it's not like I think you're going to roll out, become this well-ironed machine, but I think you can eventually iron out the kinks to that kind of a roster and become a real feared unit, especially a young and feared unit anchored by what at that point would be a veteran defense, which I think is a good combination. I think having a veteran proven defense and then a young and upcoming offense capable of explosion, capable of putting it together, but also capable of getting in their own way is a nice combination to get to where you want to. Also, if we look at special teams, the Browns seem to have, knock on wood, solved their kicker problem. They need to solve their special teams coordinator problem, but hopefully that's not going to be the biggest thing in the world to fix. But you can see the foundation in place that if the Browns make the right decisions in free agency this year, right? If they sign the right left tackle, if they, bring in the right veteran wide receiver and they draft the right players in the draft, this thing can completely change the trajectory of the Cleveland Browns' future. Like, look at what the trajectory was for the New England Patriots before the season started and what it is now that Drake May has emerged. How different we talk about those two teams now. That's the difference a true quarterback emerging could have for you. And the Browns got to make a decision. Is Shedeur going to be the guy that they want to bet on? Is it going to be Dante Moore? Is it going to be Fernando Mendoza? I'm sure you listening have an idea of what you want to do, but that's a decision that they have to make. And whatever decision they make, they got to commit to. And they got to be right. Ain't no half-stepping anymore about this team. They are in a critical place. The Cleveland Browns can make decisions this offseason that result in them becoming the franchise that we have always dreamed that they could become. They could also make decisions in this offseason that could set them back another 5 years. Or they could make some right decisions, some wrong decisions, and end up in a decent place, but maybe not the place that we want, which causes them to make a bigger swing to kind of correct that mistake that sets us back ultimately, because that's what happened with Baker Mayfield, right? The fact that the Browns did not hit a home run at quarterback with Baker Mayfield, and that they constantly were looking at like Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson and having FOMO about the quarterback position kept nagging at the Cleveland Browns as an organization. And that led the Browns to try to upgrade at quarterback, which eventually, led to Deshaun Watson. And that's how we ended up here today. This is why it's important to get quarterback right, to get the quarterback that you think can be the best, not the one that you like the most, not the one that you think is the cheapest value, but the quarterback you think you can go the furthest with. That is really what you have to ask yourself. Do you think this franchise will be able to go the furthest with this quarterback, or that quarterback? And whichever quarterback you think is the one that can take you the furthest, you go with that quarterback. I don't care how awkward of a decision that's going to be, how that makes people feel. That's the decision you have to make at the end of the day. It can't be about, well, we can save some money here and use this draft pick there, and that could make us like the Eagles. No. You have to be convinced that this guy can take you the furthest at the position, because if you make that commitment to, let's say, a Shedeur Sanders, you have to factor in that you're going to have to pay Shedeur Sanders much earlier than you would have to pay a first-round pick this year. And what does the roster look like after you do that? Right? You got to look at the quarterback that you're going to invest in and say, not only would I like to draft this guy early on, but I would think that he's going to pan out to be a player that I have no problems paying in the future. Because that's the commitment you're making. We're looking at this so short-sighted right now about this entire offseason. People are only really looking at this for the impact on 2026. 2026 is going to be the least important year of the next 5 years for the Cleveland Browns. It's going to be a year where they try to compete and make the playoffs, no doubt. But it's not going to be the most important year of that run, I would think. I would think it would be 2027, 28, 29, those years. Got to think about these decisions, not just about how they impact 2026. How do they impact 2027, 28, 29, 30, 31? Got to think years down the line here. Do you feel like if you commit to Shedeur, you're going to want to trade Shedeur to try to upgrade the position? If you feel like that's where you're going to be at in 5 years, you can't stick with them. That's rough, but that's what it is. Especially if you feel like Dante Moore is somebody you're going to want to pay in 5 years, or Fernando Mendoza is. This right here, right? You could get everything else right, but if you fuck that up, if you don't make the right thing, you can make a decision that's not technically wrong. Like Baker Mayfield wasn't technically wrong, but if you don't make the right decision, you can end up where the Cleveland Browns are today, because that's what happened in 2018. The Browns made a lot of great decisions. They did everything right in 2017, 2018. You look at those drafts, those free agencies, who they brought in, those were pretty good draft. Well, a pretty good draft in 2017, a pretty solid draft in 2018, and pretty decent free agency classes. But the one thing they missed was quarterback. They didn't miss completely, but they didn't nail quarterback. And because they didn't nail quarterback, it led to a chain of events that led to Deshaun Watson, that led to here. You can't be half right about quarterback. You got to ask yourself, who do I want on this team? Like, if I got to pay somebody $500 million in 5 years, who would I want that person to be? Who do I think has the best chance of living up to that contract? Because it's just a warning. Nobody's thinking about it now because everybody's just like, having their debates. But if the Browns don't get that part right, if the Browns take somebody and they commit to him and the guy's not that good, it could be Mendoza, it could be Moore, it could be Shedeur. They could wait till 2027, take Julian Sayin's not that good. Would they get to that point, right? Would Julian Sayin ends up being Mac Jones or something like that? It can happen in any draft class with anybody that you select or anybody that you commit to. I'm not trying to say this as a reason to deter people from committing to quarterback, but I am saying if you're going to commit to quarterback, you better be sure about it. You better be thinking about 5 years in the future. Because if you don't get that right, it can cause you to make a bigger mistake down the line. This is why this offseason is, in my opinion, the most important offseason the Cleveland Browns have had since coming back in 1999. This will have as much dictation over the future as 2018, as 1999, right? The Browns go with Tim Couch instead of Donovan McNabb. Imagine how different the franchise would be if they took Donovan McNabb and that panned out for them. Now, you can make the argument that Donovan McNabb would have also had a Tim Couch fate if he ended up in Cleveland at that time. But let's just imagine the Browns got quarterback right in 99. Where do we sit today? You can ask yourself the same question. What if we took Josh Allen? What if we took Lamar Jackson? Where would we be at today? This is the third time we're running up on that same story. If we get this right, we won't have to do a what if. Get this wrong, we'll be back to the same old what ifs. But this is the most important offseason since 99. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.